What is it, boy? What is it? Dig it up. The hell is that? Yo, what is up guys, this is Tyrannic Swine here and welcome to another game review. This time I am reviewing Recore, a open world third person adventure type game. And the story is, you play as Jewel Adams, a female explorer on the planet Far Eden who is hoping to try and terraform it for humanity after the events, since Earth has been heavily populated and heavily polluted. And she is not alone on this planet since she has her robotic companions to help her through with this mission. But things go sideways as one of the robotic mechs turns against her and tries to stop her from terraforming the planet. And so Jewel and her robotic companions have to stop this robotic menace. Now, for a story, this would have been actually very interesting if the game really did concentrate on the story. But the game more or less concentrates on the gameplay rather than the story. And Recore was one of those games that really did catch my eye during 2016. And I thought this was a really interesting game. And mostly overall, I did enjoy Recore. I think it was actually quite a fun, decent game to play, but the story there was really not much of a story whatsoever. Because there is really no interesting characters, including the main female character herself, since you don't really know much about her. All you know is that she pretty much is the daughter of the father who is in charge of this whole thing, and knows how to fix a lot of things. That's really all you find out about her. You don't really find out much about her character, and there really isn't any other human characters out there apart from one other person. But that's really it, and they're only around for like an hour at most, and then you don't see them again for a very long time. And then the robotic companions themselves could have been more interesting, as even though they do speak in sort of R2-D2 type dialogue, which is basically they make a bunch of noises and only the main character can understand them, it would have been nice if the players could understand what they were saying too, because you never know, they could have made some interesting jokes or something like that. But other than that, the story and the characters in this game could have been really good, but mostly overall it was just a sort of a side detail in some ways. And it was never really the full concentration of the game, and it felt a little bit disappointing in some ways. So, yeah, overall the story and the characters in Recore could have been done a lot better. Hell, even the main villain himself isn't all that decent, as he isn't really around all that often, and there is points in time where he does try and taunt you. But, really, story and character-wise, this game did pretty poorly. Now let's talk about some of the mechanics of this game. Now you cannot run in this game, but instead you have jet boots in some sort of way. You have jet boots which will help you traverse the terrain of the game, since a lot of this game at times can be about platforming, not just going around shooting enemies and exploring the world. This game actually does focus a little bit more on the old games from the like early 2000s, late 90s, where you had to do a lot of platforming in a lot of video games, and it kind of goes back to that sort of thing with this game. And honestly, it was really fun with the traversal gear, or the jet gear, for Jewel's character. Not only that, when an enemy is weakened, you can even extract their cores with a grapple hook in some sort of way, and then collect it so that you can use it later to upgrade your own robotic companions. Not only that, she even has one weapon. Now, yes, it is a little bit disappointing there was one weapon in this game, but the thing is that each of these the weapon has a different firing mode for a different color, white, red, yellow, and blue. As each of the enemies in this game actually can have different colors of health, meaning that the specific color on your gun will be used to weaken them. And I thought this was a cool idea because it reminded me of the Jak and Daxter series, where you would use the D-pad to switch to a different weapon, and each weapon was a different color. or of a select color category. Though it didn't really mean anything about the damage in that game, this time the color actually means something for when it comes to damaging your enemy, and I thought this was a little interesting mechanic that was added. Not only that, if you hold down the fire button, you can also emit a powerful charge, which is very useful for damaging your enemies. And then you have the robotic companions themselves. Now overall, when I finished the game, I'd only unlocked 4, but I believe there is more than that, and each of these robotic companions have their own specific powers. Like one can dig up holes, one can run across walls, one can hover and fly, and one can destroy boulders that get in your path, or a debris that's in your way. And you can upgrade these robotic companions over time with fallen pieces from your enemies, and this is a very useful thing to do, as upgrading your robotic companions is probably the most important thing in the game, because the enemies do get stronger throughout the game, and each of these robotic companions have each have a sort of advantage in each category, where they have attack, defense, and energy, and each one of the bots has like a sort of advantage in one of these areas. So it's best to make sure that you upgrade your robotic companions so that they are strong enough to fight against tougher enemies in the future. And I think this is very wise too. Now, not only do you have the main missions and the main world itself to explore, there is also dungeons in this game, and the dungeons are probably perhaps the best part of this entire game, as there are 3 different types of dungeons. You have Arena, which is where you fight a bunch of enemies until the boss arrives. Traversal, which is basically the platforming part of the dungeons, and these are really interesting and probably the most fun part of the game. And the adventure ones, which kind of combines both Arena and Traversal, though it more concentrates on the Traversal aspect, but it's a lot more exploration. And I really did like the dungeons. The dungeons are actually very decent side quests throughout the game, since there's also secondary objectives that they have, which is a time limit, which even if you don't complete it, you won't have to restart the challenge from scratch. You'll just have to get to the end and then restart it to see if you can beat it again. Then there's switches, and then there's a yellow key to find too. In each of these, if you get them all done, you will be able to unlock rewards, like treasure, which is mechanical parts for your robotic companions, which is definitely necessary, and there's even prismatic cores, which is basically not currency, but it's definitely an item that you'll need to proceed further on in the game. The more prismatic cores you have, the more areas you'll be able to explore in the game, depending on your level too. And I really did like the way these dungeons were laid out, especially the traversal and the adventure ones. The arena ones were okay, but basically it was just fighting the enemy a lot, really. Overall, the world itself was actually pretty good to look at too. Despite this being an open world game, it actually felt pretty small compared to other open world games that I've played in the past. Recore is more or less one of those open world games that's kind of small in comparison, but is still pretty big, and it was still pretty decent to explore, as there were some secret areas around. The graphics were okay, but could have been done a little bit better, as there were some points in the cutscenes where the frame rate would kind of have a bit of an issue, and that was kind of an annoyance. But other than that, the graphics were more or less okay, and yeah, they were okay, to be honest. And the thing with the dungeons is that even before you can go inside them, you have to find a way to unlock the doors for them. And at times, it's like, yes, it can be kind of fun to not unlock, but find the robot cores that you need to open the doors. But I felt like it was just basically to prolong the game's length, as this game did take me about 20 hours overall, and for an open world game, that is kind of short, especially since at some points in time you do need to grind a little bit so you can proceed a little bit further. But other than that, I think the dungeons and the world itself was done pretty decently, and the dungeons, well, like I said before, were pretty much the best part of the entire game. Now, the enemies in this game were pretty interesting, as there is quite a nice variety of enemies in this game, as, like I said before, they range from different colours, which will how POW, with your weapon selection. And the enemies at times can be quite brutal to fight against, since each of them have their own different attacks, like either ranged or melee based attacks. And they even have some special powers which can definitely stop you moving at all, like they really will get in your way. Like some will emit a fire wave, which is pretty much the worst one. They'll shoot projectiles which will stick you to the ground, or there'll be like a sort of a wave attack where it'll pretty much disorientate your vision and you can't tell what the enemy's health bar color is, so you have to guess what it is. And I thought that was an interesting mechanic. So yeah, mostly there's a lot of enemy ranges, like there's small ones, big ones, hell there's even flying ones, and each they do get tougher over time to the enemies, and it always depends which one to target. It's like always target the more powerful ones and you'll pretty much be in a good position. Also, there is a point in time where, like I said before, where you use a grapple hook to extract their cores. There's two ways of doing this. You either get their health down to a certain length and then you can extract it, or there is a point in time where you can get lucky and then you can instantly extract it, which is always a lifesaver in a tough, long battle. Now, the boss battles could have been done a little bit better in this game, as there wasn't really much to get from them, as I didn't really die all so often on the boss battles. The boss battles were pretty much one of the more easier parts of the game, including the final boss battle itself. The final boss battle I pretty much only died once, and that was really it. It was mainly the amount of enemies in the room that really made me die, as the more enemies there was, the more difficult it did get. But I did think there was a lot of enjoyment from fighting the enemies, even though the combat did get quite repetitive at times. It felt okay, and it did do the job well, and the enemies did put up a good fight most of the time. So yeah, I think the enemies were actually done very decently in this game, along with the AI is pretty decent too, including your robotic companions. The robotic companions AI is really well done compared to other games where you have companions. It's definitely up there as a very nicely programmed one. So yeah, the enemies and even the robotic companions AI have been done quite well. Now, a few last things is that there is also a few audio logs to find in this game, which get sort of supposed to give you exposition on the story and stuff like that, but really it really did not help for me, especially since one of the audio logs is pretty much about one of the robots, so you can't understand what the hell they're saying. So really I didn't really give much of a damn about the audio logs, but there is a few other things, as the way that the robots can be upgraded, as the robots can be customized in this game, but not the main character, though I felt like Jewel didn't really need to have a customization option for her. But the robots was definitely quite nice, as you needed parts so you could pretty much build the specifications to make them better. And you needed to have a certain amount as well, and you could also combine the pieces or split them into different types. And of course there is also a thing called core fusion, which is where you can use the enemy cores that you've gained from combat to upgrade the cores of your own robotic AIs, and this I think was a very decent system. I really like the way you could customize your robotic companions, and the way that the customization looked different too. They actually look quite a variety of the customization pieces. And yes, there's also a fast travel option, which honestly I feel like was quite necessary, since this world can be a bit of a bore to travel around, and overall, I think mostly this game was actually a pretty interesting one. It's like the only downsides is that the story was pretty bland along with the characters. The combat at times could be a bit repetitive, but it was still mainly fun. And then there's the fact that the closer you get to the end of the game, the more you kind of have to grind to get it done. As the final point of the game is where you have to go up through 5 floors, but each time you pretty much are going to have to grind so you can get to the next one, so you're the right level to take on the enemies. And that was a bit of a chore at times, but it wasn't a necessarily long grind, and it was it was actually pretty okay. So yeah, overall I think Recore is an okay game, with, despite the campaign being a bit bland, a bit of a repetitive combat and a bit of grinding needed, it really did have, it had good visuals, a good level design, the platforming was really done well, the enemies were doing really well, the customization, the upgrading, hell, even the soundtrack was actually really decent in this game, and it actually was quite interesting at times. So yeah, overall, I'm going to give Recore an 8 out of 10. So, that is my review of Recore, a pretty interesting game that did have a few setbacks, but mostly overall I think was a decent game. So, hope you guys have enjoyed this review. Leave a like, subscribe, comment down below of what you think is right or wrong with the game, and I'll see you guys in the next random video.